every Pesach, I really think a lot of my mother and my grandmother. And so this Pesach, the fact that my mother is here in Bola but in hospital is obviously a little challenging, because I thought she was going to be cushering my kitchen tomorrow. And knowing her, she may still do that. But what I remember really strongly is that my mother and her mother, my grandmother Jessie, after whom my nephew is named, every year, about 2 weeks before Pesach, they would kasher one of their kitchens. And by the way, I was brought up, strong Reformed Jew, but my mother took Pesach so seriously, still does take Pesach very, very seriously in terms of the preparation and the kashering and everything else and the cooking. But anyway, they would kasher one of their kitchens about 2 weeks before Pesach, and they would just spend days and days like cooking up. I never knew that you could buy kosher Pesach cookies and cakes, because they were just would appear lemon biscuits and macaroons and coconut pyramids and chocolate cakes and all of this stuff that would just appear like this incredible font of kosher for Pesach baked goods, and then of course they'd make filter fish from scratch and all of it. And it was just, it's always been, every year at Pesach, my mother of course misses her mother and remembers all of that. And I'm thinking about it because tonight, probably, depending what happens, I will probably be getting my boxes of Pesach stuff up from my basement and putting them ready in the kitchen. I'll probably, before I go to bed, set my oven onto its self-clean cycle and open all the windows while that toxic stuff kind of escapes. And I will gather up my silverware and pots that I want to kasher tomorrow. And tomorrow, some of you may take advantage of the fact that from 1 to 3, we're going to have a gigantic pot of boiling water at the back of Bonei Shalom, where we can kasher metal utensils and hard plastics. And all of this is extraordinary in a way, and maybe in another way kind of infuriating, and we sort of ask like, why? Because that's one of the big questions of Pesach, right? Is like, Ma nishtana halayla hazeh? Why is this night different from all other nights? And there's this sort of incredible kind of paradox, because everything external has a mirror that's internal, for a start. We know that, right? And this idea that we go through this process, some of us, and we all have our different sort of points to which we drive ourselves crazy. As someone reminded me this week, dust is not chametz, right? Cleaning a kitchen for spring cleaning is a lovely thing to do, but Pesach cleaning and spring cleaning are not exactly the same thing, right? There are limits to it. But there's something that's also really powerful about the ritual. We read in the Torah about this eish, this purifying fire, right? This eish tukad, this fire that keeps burning. And there's something about, for me, the metaphor of a fire that keeps burning that is really about like the consistency of our traditions over multiple generations. So there's ways in which these ideas of like how we kasher, and what how do we kasher plastic? Can we kasher plastic? How do we kasher metal? Can we kasher metal? How do we kasher surfaces? Do we have to cover surfaces? All of these questions that some of us were absolutely not brought up with that, and some of us kind of find it just bemusing, and some of us find it environmentally disgusting, and some of us find it ridiculous. In fact, my mother would be sort of like driving herself crazy, like cleaning stuff out and getting all the Pesach stuff ready. And my dad would sit there reading the newspaper, say, "This is ridiculous. Why are you doing all this? You drive yourself crazy. You're exhausted," and would. He'd love it when he sat down to the Seder, but he found the whole process. My dad, who defined himself as a secular agnostic, would go along with some of it, but would find some of it ridiculous. And I'm sure some of you find some of the details of what a traditionally kosher for Passover home looks like to be maybe challenging. But what I want to say about it is this. First of all, this is Shabbat Hagadol. Joni shared that Shabbat Hagadol actually there's many different reasons why it's called Shabbat Hagadol. I want to start with that, which is this fact that really Shabbat, as I asked the kids downstairs earlier this morning, is Shabbat a masculine noun or a feminine noun? Feminine, right? So if you were going to say the big Shabbat, you would say Shabbat Hagadolah, right? So Shabbat Hagadol, from the offset, is not even grammatically correct. Shabbat Hagadol seems to refer to something else, and so there's all these kind of interpretations. I mean, I think one of the kids actually downstairs said it was beautiful. Your son, in fact. I said, is Shabbat masculine or feminine? And he said both. And actually, that's a very profound answer, because it is both. I mean, we can't. Masculine has aspects to it that we think of as feminine, and aspects to it that we think of as masculine. In fact, there's this idea that Friday night is the feminine aspect of Shabbat. Kabbalat Shabbat, the receiving, the Shabbat Kala. Shabbat morning is the masculine aspect. I'm on a total tangent right now. Shabbat morning is the masculine aspect of Shabbat. And Shabbat at Mincha is the integration of the two. It's reflected actually in traditional liturgy, because you have the special inclusions in the Amidah of Shabbat has bah in her, in it, in the feminine on Friday night, bo in it, in the masculine in the Amidah of Shacharit of Shabbat morning, bo, the masculine. And in a traditional Siddur you'll see a Mincha, the Mincha prayer of Shabbat has bam, beit, mem, meaning in them. In other words, there's this sort of non-binary they aspect of Shabbat. So it's he, she, they really is Shabbat. Anyway, back to Shabbat Hagadol. So Shabbat Hagadol, if it's not describing this, the action, it's not an adjective that goes grammatically with Shabbat. There's this idea that it's the 10th of Nisan. The Shabbat of the Exodus was on the 10th of Nisan. Guess what the date is today? 10th of Nisan, right? So this is one of the years where the actual calendar aligns, according to tradition, with the calendar as it was, because the actual Exodus happened on a Thursday, and the first day of Pesach is on a Thursday this year, right? And so there's that idea that the 10th of Nisan was the preparation, as Joni said, when they would each take, I think it was a lamb, not a sheep, but you should never believe everything you read in the stone Chumash. but whatever, they gathered their lambs and thought they were going to be like attacked by the Egyptians, and they weren't. And there were all these other miracles that are associated. So it's as if the seed of redemption really happens on the 10th of Nisan, and it's Shabbat. So Shabbat Hagadol is never, we don't celebrate the 10th of Nisan, we celebrate Shabbat Hagadol regardless of when Shabbat falls in relation to Pesach. The Shabbat before Pesach is always Shabbat Hagadol. And then there are all these different traditions about what that really means in terms of the idea that really we're connecting to Shabbat. There's a very strong tradition, and maybe some of you will do this today, of on Shabbat afternoon actually studying the text of the Haggadah, about really starting to thinking about the themes, because traditionally we're not doing the cleaning and the preparation because it's Shabbat, but we can start to really study the themes of it. It's also a strong tradition that it's a time that the rabbi goes over like all of the laws, like, so how can you kasher your metal, and how can you can, and how you prepare. But also, of course, there's this internal aspect to it, because the external process of cleaning and kashering, as I said just before, is really about mirroring an internal. Like, who actually are we? Who do we want to be? Who are we without chametz? What is chametz? Chametz is this physical substance that the Torah is so explicit about. Not only will you clean it out, you won't own it. And if you want to sell your chametz and have me as your agent, you can still do that. You can't even own this substance. It's got to be something that cannot be seen in your homes, right? It can be stored away and sold. It can be given away. It can be burned. And next Wednesday morning at about 11 o'clock, we're going to be having a fire out the back. You see, this is what I love about this, the elements of this, fire and water, which are such powerful elements that have cleansing aspects to them. So if you want to come and bring metal objects, you can bring them to be boiled in boiling water tomorrow. And if you want to come and bring your last bits of chametz on Wednesday morning, you can come and burn them on the fire. There's something about the ritual of fire and the ritual of water that is really powerful. But all of it is really has to be, it can't, if it was just the surface of it, if it was just about cleaning out cupboards and getting rid of stuff, then I would not do it. If I didn't believe that there's some kind of internal process that is really mirrored. Because from the Talmud on, the rabbis kind of asked the question, well, what is chametz really? It can't just be a physical substance, right? So chametz is also, it can be, in some sources it says it's the Yetzer Hara. It's the aspect of self that is able to commit unspeakably evil acts, that when we all have that piece of us. It's our ego. It's, it's superfluity. It's all of the stuff that we accumulate in life, both physically and emotionally, that is just, we don't need, and that we get rid of it, right? The 5 grains that can become matzah are the same 5 grains that are chametz, right? Wheat, barley, oats, spelt, and rye. Those are the 5 grains, right? Wheat, spelt, barley, oats, and rye. Those are the 5 grains. Those are the only 5 grains, and the only one, of course, for people who are gluten-free that is actually technically kosher for actual fulfilling the mitzvah of matzah on is oat matzah. But each of those 5 grains can become matzah. But each of those 5 grains are what also becomes chametz. So it's like it's the same ingredients. It's just what we do with them. In the same way when we talk about Purim and we read all of the lavish materials that were in the big party that Ahasuerus had at the beginning, it's like those same ingredients can be used for holiness or they can be used for debauchery. In the same way, the 5 grains can be used for this simplicity of the matzah or for the superfluity of the chametz. And it's just about this agent that makes it rise up, right? And so we know that that's about physically leavening a product, but it's also about ourselves, our egos. The places in ourselves that get puffed up with self-importance, the parts of ourselves that forget what is really important in the world. So yes, we can be scouring out our cupboards and cleaning out and getting rid of the chametz and burning it and kashering it and selling it and hiding it away and all of those different things that we do. But if we're not also thinking about who we are in this world as we celebrate this Zman Cherutenu that the rabbis describe, the season of freedom, and consider what it really means to be free in a world where so many people are oppressed, if we don't ask ourselves those questions, like how we can, in our own rituals of freedom, think about people who are not free, which seems to be so fundamentally important. And this year, there are Jewish groups all over the world who are saying, please, on Shabbat HaGadol, mention Israel and the tyranny that's going on in this new government in Israel. It's like, and Rabbi Jonathan Sachs has this incredibly powerful statement in his first essay on Pesach, where he says that Pesach tells a revolutionary story of how the supreme power intervened in history to liberate the supremely powerless. It is a story of the defeat of probability by the force of possibility. It defines what it is to be a Jew, a living symbol of hope. And he carries on to say that a fundamental choice that civilizations must make then, now, and perhaps for all time. There is nothing antiquarian about the issues Pesach raises. Slavery, freedom, politics, power, state, society, human dignity and responsibility. These are as salient today as they were in the days of Moses. Pesach can never be obsolete. And then at the end of that introduction, he says, as long as humans seek to exercise power over one another, the story will continue and the choice will still be ours. As long as humans seek to exercise power over one another. And we know, and some of us studied last Shabbat with Rabbi Arik Hashiman, that the challenges of Jewish power in our world right now are quite problematic in terms of the future of Israel and the Middle East and really the whole world and the whole Jewish world. And so we think about these questions while we are got our hands filled with soap and water and sponges and blow torches and however else we might choose to be kashering. It's like it's this external process that is thinking like, how am I complicit in a world that still enslaves other people? Or more kind of emotionally and psychologically, what am I still enslaved to? Where is my chametz? You know, it's this beautiful, beautiful tradition that many of us will be doing on Tuesday night of bidikat chametz. Chametz has these different processes. First we clean it out, we can sell it, we can burn it, but there's also the searching for it. Bidikat chametz is the searching for chametz. It's a very powerful ritual that some of us think is just something that we do for our kids, but it's so much deeper than that. It's so much deeper than that. The idea of taking 10 pieces of chametz, which is like, for OCD people, it's like unbelievable. You've just spent like 3-4 days cleaning your house, and then you take 10 bits of chametz and hide in your house the very thing that you've been working like crazy to get rid of. So you hide these bits of chametz around your house. You take a feather and a candle, and in some traditions a wooden spoon, and you use the candle to light up the different parts of your rooms where the chametz might be. And then when you find it, you take the feather, and you take that feather and you just kind of brush the chametz onto the wooden spoon, and those are the bits of chametz that get burned on the fire the following morning, right? It's an incredibly powerful ritual. And some of us know, and Dr. Michael Kagan, who was here a few weeks ago, I had the opportunity to perform his incredible one-man show that he's written about his father. But he, in his Haggadah, the holistic Haggadah, he talks about B'dikat Chametz in such a powerful, powerful way. Because he says, like, we don't take a flashlight and a pneumatic drill. We take a candle and a feather. There's something about this gentle ritual of saying in a loving, self-loving kind of way, let me, as I'm finding this chametz on the outside, let me look at where my chametz is on the inside, Quoting the verse from Proverbs that says, the light of God is the soul of a human being, right? So the candle, the Ner Hashem is the Nishmat Adam. The light, this candlelight, somehow it shines our inner world into being. And we all know that if you are in a completely dark room and you take a candle, the power of this tiny little candle flame to just light up all of those spaces and to look at those spaces and to find these bits of chametz, and as we find them, just say, there's another piece of chametz that maybe is something on the inside and is certainly something on the outside. And so whatever level we go to, and as I said, we'll all be in very different places. For me, it starts tonight, God willing, and I'm giving myself Sunday and Monday, that's it. Because Tuesday I want to already be cooking for Seders and whatever else I have to do to get ready for Pesach. But there is something about the details of the law, of the halakha, and the tradition of teaching the Hilchot Pesach, which is, like I said, another reason why Shabbat Hagadol is called Shabbat Hagadol, because this idea that we're learning all of these mitzvot. It's kind of Shabbat Hagadol, by the way, is very parallel to Shabbat Shuvah, the Shabbat between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. Back in the day, those were the only 2 Shabbats where the rabbi would give a sermon. And they'd be really long sermons. On Shabbat Shuvah, talking about like Hilchot Teshuvah, what does it really mean to return, to repent, to forgive one another, all of that. And on Shabbat Hagadol, what does it really mean to clean out our chametz? There's this, and they're very parallel in a certain way, because cleaning for Pesach is a form of Teshuvah if we do the work properly, if we do the work externally and internally, and if we really think about, like, do I want to be like a big loaf of bread, or do I want to be like a matzah? Do I want to be in that space of humility and simplicity and getting rid of all of the superfluity? One of the other explanations for Shabbat Hagadol, which is the one that actually Maura and Esther and I checked in earlier this morning, and we both agree it's our favorite and probably most plausible explanation for the term of Shabbat Hagadol, is from the Haftorah that Joni read. Because at the very end, when it talks about Eliyahu Hanavi coming, he talks about Yom Adonai Ha'el Hagadol Hanorah, right? This great and awesome day that is going to come, that Eliyahu Hanavi is going to be the herald of. Eliyahu is going to do this work according to Malachi, that Haftorah, that beautiful Haftorah that we read, through turning the hearts of the children back to their parents and turning the hearts of the parents back to their children, which is symbolic of the way in which redemption can be achieved in this world, right? The idea of broken families being somehow a reflection of all of the broken relationships in the world. And so this idea that Eliyahu Hanavi, Elijah the prophet, is going to be the one who is going to bring us back on track with a world that is going to be redeemed. So this Haftorah that we read that talks about Yom Gadol, a big day when that's all going to happen. So whatever the mechanics and the details of the rituals, And very quickly, I will say, because some people want to know, and people are unlikely to, unless you're really obsessive compulsive, to read in great detail about all of it. But there are some substances that absolutely cannot be kashered at all. There are some substances that can be kashered by immersing them in cold water, some by immersing them in boiling water, and some only by fire and flame. And what those different substances are depends on the way in which something becomes potentially unkosher. The same way it becomes unkosher is the way in which it becomes kosher. So, for instance, if you want to kosher an oven, then you have to cook the oven to a very high temperature, and the self-clean cycle on modern ovens will do that job for you, and then wipe it out. If you want to kosher bakeware that has only ever been in the oven, you kosher it in the oven, right? If you want to kosher other like pots and pans, technically they need to come into contact with fire, but other metal like utensils like silverware and metal utensils, all metal, can be immersed in boiling water. Some Sephardi opinions, and certainly in the conservative movement, hard plastics can also be koshered in the same way. It's called hagalah. It's a process of immersing them in boiling water. And surfaces, different types of surfaces that are considered to be porous, cannot be koshered and traditionally are covered over, and surfaces that are not porous, like aluminium and granite and what's that other thing? Whatever it is. Marble, quartz, all of those things can be koshered just by pouring boiling water over them. Anyway, enough about the details of it. I just think I'm not doing my job as a rabbi on Shabbat HaGadol if I don't at least mention those. But what I really want to say is that the idea of Shabbat HaGadol being related to Eliyahu Hanavi, to this time of redemption, and to this fact that as we end Pesach on the 8th day of Pesach, we also read about Eliyahu Hanavi, we also read about redemption, and this idea that we each have a piece of that redemptive story to perform in this world. And so I hope that however we choose to prepare for this amazing, beautiful Chag of Pesach, however we choose to prepare for it, that the external is a mirror of the internal, that we can think deeply about the ways in which the chametz is part of our self that we want to rid ourselves of, and that the matzah is our truer self, our humbler self, our purer self, that we can all tune into, so that God willing, when we're sitting down to a Seder next Wednesday night, next Thursday night, that we can feel ourselves closer to matzah than to chametz, and that we can feel that we are each playing our part in bringing a world that where the hearts of the children will be to their parents, and the hearts of the parents will be to their children, and the hearts of all humanity will recognize that we can no longer inflict cruelty on each other, whatever we do. And the last thing I'll say, I'll give Jonathan Sachs the last word, in an essay that he wrote on this week's Parsha on Tzav. He talks about the tension between Torah and Haftorah. The Torah is so often about details and laws, and the Haftorah is about vision, right? About prophetic vision. And he says, I believe that this feud between Torah and Haftorah, priestly and prophetic voices, is one of Judaism's great glories. We hear both how to act and why. Without the how, action is lame. Without the why, behavior is blind. Combine priestly detail and prophetic vision, and you have spiritual greatness. May we all achieve spiritual greatness this Pesach. Shabbat Shalom.